We're hearing reports that Officer Wilson has not been contacted by the prosecutor's office informing him of an indictment. Reports suggesting that could mean he's expecting good news, as he apparently is under the impression that they would have called him to allow him to turn himself in. However, he may have been wrong about that, and we have not confirmed those reports. I want to tell you what we're looking at here on screen left. This is the inside of the courtroom where we expect the result to be announced momentarily. We expect the county prosecutor, Robert McCullough, to announce the results, to announce whether the indictment is being returned or one is not. The grand jurors will not be in this room. I want to correct myself on something I said on O'Reilly earlier, which was that it was possible for the grand jurors to speak. I'm told now under Missouri state law they are not allowed to speak, and so we don't expect the grand jurors to make any statement during or after this presentation. However, we're being told that not only will the county prosecutor make the announcement, but that he will accept questions from the media, over whose shoulders we are looking right now, including our own producer who is inside the courtroom and will be asking questions as well. In fact, you can see her there bottom left in the pink shirt. We've got a jam-packed lineup for you tonight, including Judge Alex Ferrer with analysis on the grand jury. Mike Tobin is on the ground in Ferguson, and forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, who performed an autopsy on Michael Brown at the request of his parents, will be with us as well. We are going to start, as we await this verdict, with Judge Alex Ferrer, host of Judge Alex and a retired Florida Circuit Court judge. It's not really a verdict so much as a decision on whether this case will see a petite jury, a real jury, or not. And how will it be announced, Judge? What should we expect to hear?
Well, I think the prosecutor is going to be very much straight to the point. He's going to come forward and say whether or not they have chosen to indict or to not indict.
What are the catchwords, though?
Well, the catchwords typically are that the grand jury has come back with a true bill or has come back with no true bill, but they may just say it in the terms of indictment so that the public understands it clearly. Those are the legal terms for it. I understand your point about the speculation as to whether or not they would come back with an indictment since the officer hasn't been asked to come in, and that if you're a betting man, that certainly would give you a direction. If you're a betting woman, I should say, that would certainly give you a direction to go based on those facts, and I tend to agree with that. But we're so close to a decision right now that I don't think it's worth speculating. We're going to know the answer in just a few minutes.
Agreed. That's the New York Times that put that out there, claiming they had spoken with contacts of Officer Wilson's. We have not yet done that. But wanted to acknowledge that that reporting is out there. It is not our own, nor have we confirmed it. But we will know momentarily whether Officer Wilson will be indicted. If he is indicted, Judge, what would happen next?
Well, the next thing that would happen is he would have to surrender himself. They probably would issue what's called a sealed indictment in most places, not disclosing the charges. He would have to surrender or be taken into custody. Typically, in a situation where if they fear the individual is going to flee, they might have other officers, state officers or federal officers, watching his location to take him into custody if he doesn't just voluntarily surrender. But as a courtesy, they would offer his lawyer the opportunity to bring him in and probably wouldn't expect that he would flee anywhere. Then he would be taken into custody, fingerprinted, photographed, and he would appear in front of a judge probably first thing in the morning on the question of if he was entitled to bail, and if so, what amount.
Now, as we're looking at this courtroom, I mean, typically, obviously, cases don't usually, grand jury proceedings don't usually get this much attention. There's almost never a prosecutor standing in a courtroom announcing what the grand jury has decided. How unusual is this? Have you ever seen this before?
Well, when you have cases of this magnitude, you know, I mean, remember Miami, where I'm from, we've had the McDuffie riots, the Lozano riots, the Alvarez riots, all involving white male officers and black male victims or Hispanic victim. When you have that kind of pressure from the public and that kind of concern, then the prosecutor goes the extra mile. Those cases tend to take on a life of their own, as we see. But you're absolutely right, Megan. This is a case involving a shooting that was submitted to the grand jury for a decision. It happens all the time. It just gets more attention in cases like this where there's a racial concern.
He has said, we've gotten conflicting reports today about what this prosecutor will or will not release. We were told if there's an indictment, they'll release the indictment and that's it. But if there's no indictment, earlier the prosecutor has said, I will release testimonials and other evidence. I know I understand you have to redact some of those so that to protect the identity of the witnesses and so on. But he said he would release evidence that was presented. Then there was a question about whether he was allowed to do that. We had read that the law there in Missouri, the Sunshine Law, allows him to do it. And then there was a question about whether he'd have to run it by the judge, and we were told the judge has not yet signed off on it. How unusual would it be for a prosecutor to release the evidence presented to a grand jury in a case in which no true bill, meaning no indictment, was returned?
Well, I've never heard of it. Let's put it that way. But as you know, we have 50 states with 50 different laws. I'd be surprised that their Sunshine Law allows for that, because there specifically is a law on confidentiality of the grand jury, the testimony presented to the grand jury and the grand juror's identity. But, you know, he would probably know that better than I would, I suppose. What I worry about is it's not just redacting the names, because a lot of witnesses are called before the grand jury and they are not just told, they are promised confidentiality. One of the good things about that is you get witnesses who come forward who otherwise might not have come forward. As we heard earlier on, there were these rumors about leaks from the grand jury testimony that suggested that 6 or 7 African-American witnesses came forward and gave a version that completely supported the officer's testimony. We don't know if that's true or not, but allegedly those witnesses came forward only because they felt like they would be safe since it's confidential and secret, and they did not feel safe coming forward publicly like other witnesses who were contrary to the officer felt. If the prosecutor is now going to release the information, it may not be enough to redact the names of the witnesses. You know, if I'm a witness and I'm saying, listen, from my apartment on the 2nd floor across the street from the police car, I could see this happen and I could see them moving in this direction, it really wouldn't take a genius to figure out who that witness is. So I'm a little concerned about that, but I understand the need, why he feels the need to put the community's concern at rest that this was a fair proceeding. I
want to tell our viewers that we're getting an update from inside the courtroom. We're expecting, again, that only the prosecutor, Robert McCullough, I'm sorry, it's the author, Robert McCullough will speak. The announcement is expected to take 20 minutes and then he will take questions from the media for about 20 minutes. Which is just extraordinary and quite an opportunity for the media and for you all to actually hear what happened and what went into the result we're about to hear. Let's talk about the possibility, the very real possibility, given all the press leaks and other leaks we've had in the weeks leading up to this moment, that Officer Darren Wilson will not be indicted by this grand jury. This prosecutor was criticized for not going before the grand jurors and arguing for an indictment. He presented the evidence. He reportedly put on all the witnesses that had relevant evidence, but he then didn't turn to the grand jurors and ask for an indictment on murder, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. He just presented them with those options and let them decide. He was criticized, saying normally a prosecutor would be advocating for one of those charges. Is that true, and is it controversial the way he did it?
I suspect that it is true that normally a prosecutor doesn't take a case in front of the grand jury that the prosecutor does not expect and want to prosecute. And if you want to prosecute a case, you fight forcefully for that indictment. But I don't want to put myself in his mind. What comes to mind in my mind is the public knows of the witnesses that have come out publicly. What I can tell you from experience in cities that have had riots, in Miami's scenario in particular, when you have a street scene like this where there is a lot of tension, police officers shot a black male, a lot of times you get witnesses who jump onto other witnesses' story. One witness says, I saw this, and 6 other people say, yes, he did this, he shot him in the back. And then, of course, evidence comes out and shows that's not the case. You know, the case, as I mentioned, takes a life of its own, and testimony can change, and people can come out and say different things. That when you finally look at the forensic evidence, when the prosecutor finally gets forensic evidence and gets other witnesses who come forward and their testimony matches the evidence that they have, the prosecutor has a tough decision to make. One is to say, I'm not going to file charges. And as you remember, Megan, this prosecutor, there was a big challenge to him being appointed because his father was killed by an African-American male.
Right.
A lot of members of the community said, he's not going to be fair, he's not going to be fair. So I'm totally speculating here, let me say that. But if I'm the prosecutor and the evidence that's presented to me shows me that it's not consistent with what was said in the media, but it's more consistent with the officer's version, in order to avoid the appearance that I am just tubing the case, I might impanel a grand jury and say, I'm going to show you everything. Not just the witnesses that if I wanted to take this guy to the mat, I would show you, but the witnesses that he probably would present, and put everything on the table and let them make a decision. That's the only thing that comes to mind. Other than that, I would expect the prosecutor to fight forcefully for the indictment he seeks.
Judge Alex, stand by. I want to bring in Fox News legal analyst Arthur Aidala, who has tried cases on both ends of the criminal spectrum.